Well, Brad, thank you for joining me today. So I guess we can start off. You're born and raised in Hawaii. Met you almost 10 years now. 10 years
Yeah,
ago. We've known each other for about 10 years. Met you, I think in 2012 during Thanksgiving. You came up with my brother to spend Thanksgiving when I was still in high school.
yeah.
Um, yeah, your first time in Portland. Yeah.
That's true. It was fun. It was a good time hanging out
Yeah.
with you.
Yeah.
Playing
Well, here we
Halo,
are, 10 years later.
right?
Yeah. Well, Brad, so obviously you're from Hawaii. You were born and raised. Yeah, let's talk to me a little bit about Hawaiian history.
Yeah,
Aside from just the basics that, Hawaii was annexed in 1898 and Hawaii didn't actually join the Union, as a state in, I think, August
yeah,
1999. Yeah.
yeah,
So, give it to us in a nutshell, if you
yeah,
can.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I'll make it pretty quick too, because I think I told you before, I'm like no historian on Hawaii, on Hawaiian history, but like we all actually do have to learn it in school, which is actually really good. So you do take like basic Hawaiian history classes, but so essentially, yeah, essentially the first like the Hawaiian Islands were are like a Polynesian archipelago, which was inhabited by other Polynesians that like sailed like kind of navigating using the stars. So that's like the very very start of the history. But essentially, like where it comes into like U.S. history, it kind of goes back actually to about the 1700s when this man named Captain Cook discovered the islands, or I don't say discovered, sorry, he thought he discovered, quote unquote discovered, just like Columbus, quote unquote discovered America. But he stumbled upon the islands and essentially posed as a god because the Hawaiian people thought he was the god Lono, who was a fair-skinned god, and used them for whatever they had, all their resources and all that stuff, and essentially left, had to come back because there was a storm, and the Hawaiian people were like, "You're a god. How, like, how are you here?" And essentially, when he came back, it was not during a good time for the Hawaiian people. I think during the first time he came back, it was like during a special, I think, time in like Hawaiian society. So it was seen as like a message. But when he came back the second time, it was more suspicious. So um, they ended up actually killing him after this whole ordeal where he like tried to kidnap someone and like threatened the people to like fix his boat, threatened the Hawaiian people to fix his boat, and they wouldn't do it. And he ended up dying in about the 17 on Valentine's Day. I think in like 1770, in the 1770s, I think. And essentially, that was the first contact with white people in Hawaii. And after that, they started sending over like more missionaries when they knew there was like contact, like or when they knew that the Hawaiian Islands were there, they started sending more missionaries over, trying to like convert the Hawaiian people to like Christianity, in an attempt to essentially take over the island, which is what they did. And like you said, it was annexed in the 1800s when they uh, threatened the Hawaiian monarchy into signing over the Hawaiian Islands, and I think even at one point threatened to like bomb the islands because they had military ships if they didn't hand over the land. And Hawaii was forcefully taken by the United States. Um, the culture was almost eradicated. I mean, there are less than 8,000, I think, pureblood Hawaiians left in the world right now. Um, their language was taken away from them, their dances, their culture, their everything. And the only thing that they got in the future was actually a it's unfortunate because the only payback they got for any of that so far has been just an apology back in the 90s by Bill Clinton, basically just saying sorry for threatening to kill all of you to take the islands. And it's a pretty sad story, unfortunately, and I think a lot of people actually don't know that it's kind of a sad story about the Hawaii Islands. And that I think, and I'm glad that you started with that because I think it's actually like really important people know that because I think that's one of the first steps of like actually respecting Hawaii when you visit. I think a lot of people go and think it's like it is a really fun and beautiful place and you should go and enjoy the Hawaiian Islands, but I think people, when they go there, they're not so aware of like where this land came from and how it actually came into the hands of the United States and the kind of violence and the violence it took from the United States to get there. So yeah, it was brief, sad history of Hawaii. Sad history of Hawaii. Sorry to get a little dark, but it's the truth and everything. We
In
all
a
kind of need
way,
to know.
in a way, it kind of almost mirrors like the Native American story as well, when the
Hmm.
United
Hmm.
States came over, colonized it, and then essentially as we pushed out west to expand, we relocated Native Americans to the quote unquote Indian reservations, even though that's not technically the correct term anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah. Out of curiosity, is Hawaii or the ethnic native Hawaiian language, is that still spoken a lot in Hawaii? Is it rare
Mm,
now? Like, 'cause obviously English is the main language, of course, but
yeah.
is it something that is still taught in schools, perhaps?
Yeah, that's a good question. I actually had a Hawaiian language class at my high school, but it is, I would say, I would say it's kind of rare. To meet someone who's fluent is like, it's a really special thing to meet someone who's fluent in Hawaiian. There are a lot of people who can do it, but it's just, it's interesting because I have to separate my mind from like what I know of just growing up in Hawaii as opposed to like everything. Like I think when you think of people, like I guess what is it called? The population um, in Hawaii as opposed to population in the United States, obviously is a lot smaller. So I think a lot of people could speak Hawaiian, but overall, I would say it's actually extremely rare to meet someone who could speak fluent Hawaiian. I think I only know two people who can do it
Mm.
personally. So, and I only know one for sure. The other one I know can speak it, but I don't know about fluently. So it is definitely like when I lived there, I felt like a lot of people could speak it, and I felt like it was pretty common. But maybe I was mistaken, I guess is what I'm saying. I think it actually is much more of a rare thing.
Yeah, well, like you said, the native Hawaiian population has dwindled
Hmm.
drastically since the colonization of Hawaii. So
Yeah,
I can imagine that it is a rare language to come across where someone is actually speaking it fluently.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, I guess when you said going off of that with you growing up in Hawaii, um, did you ever like it was a small world for you? Like obviously Hawaii's 8 islands. Did you feel like it was such a small world that you were trapped and you wanted to get out?
Yeah. Actually, that's a huge like thing that I think a lot of people from Hawaii struggle with. Actually, it's it's funny. It's either, and I always narrow it down to like two types of people, even though obviously there are exceptions. But like, usually it's the people who like when you're going up there, you're usually like, I never want to come back here. Like I want to leave Hawaii because it's just you feel so exactly you said like you're so trapped. If you want to go to any other place that's not your island, you have to fly, and it was really expensive, like always to fly. There's not really any boats that can take you unless you have like a small boat that you can do yourself, that you can, drive yourself. So yeah, like wanting to get out is definitely like was definitely a huge thing for me personally. The other side of the story are people who can never leave Hawaii, who are just so in love with it, so in love with the way of life there and the feeling, and like that's fine too. But personally, that wasn't for me. I didn't like being trapped on an island, especially because it was just so different than what you thought. Like it was just so different than life here, in the United, like in the mainland United States, like, and you don't realize that when you're growing up and when you're from there. But Hawaii is like, it's like another country. Like when you go there, it's not like you don't feel like you're in the United States, even though obviously everyone's speaking English and stuff. Like it feels so different, and people either love it or they want to get out. And I think I'm actually one of the rare ones that's somewhere in the middle. Like I love Hawaii, but when I go there, it's exactly, I feel after a week, I start feeling like how I was in
Hmm.
high school, where I'm like, oh my God, like I can only drive like 10 minutes, down the road, and like there's not really anything to do, and like it's beautiful, of course, but like
It's
when you grow
small.
there, yeah, it's beautiful and it's small, but when you grow up there for 18 years, like it's kind of no big deal for you anymore, and like I guess I mean more so the beauty, just like, wow, it's so nice and sunny here. And growing up there, I hated the sun. I was like, I want it to rain all the time, like especially being from the west side of Maui and Lahaina. It's known for like always being sunny.
Hmm.
It's so funny now because I was like, I can go to Oregon, like everybody's like, it's rainy, you're not gonna like it, and I'm like, I could do it. I like the rain, like I don't like. And then now I'm here and I'm like, oh man, I just want the sun.
You don't know
Really love it.
how much
What you
you're gonna
have,
miss
right?
something, yeah, until you don't have it. Yeah,
Yeah.
well, when was your first time on the mainland?
That's a good question. My first time, wow. Well, I was actually, was on the mainland the first time when I was pretty young. Okay, yeah. My mother's family is actually from Baltimore,
Mhm.
so I flew to Baltimore maybe when I was like, I mean, obviously an infant, but I would say the earliest time I remember would be maybe like when I was like five, 5 or 6.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
6 or 7. I
Yeah.
can't remember. Yeah, but I went when I was pretty young, but I only went to the mainland about 3 times before I moved there. 3 or 4 times before I moved there. So out of in my whole 18 years of living in Hawaii, I maybe left Hawaii, to go to the mainland like 4 or 5 times
Do you
my whole
remember what it
life.
was like visiting the mainland?
Yeah,
Like, were you in
yeah,
awe how big it was and things like that? The way of life? How was it different?
yeah, kinda. I was what really got me was the smells for some reason. I think I just have a really sensitive sense of smell, and like I was like, wow, it smells like I was about to curse, but it does not smell good in the mainland as opposed to Hawaii. It smells like, like it's just like well, I guess because the first time I went, it's like on the East Coast and much more, I guess industrial,
The city
you'd
life,
say.
yeah,
Yeah,
versus
city like,
open air, open ocean.
yeah. So it's just like, oh God, like gas. You smell like gas, and like the smell of like I don't know, city is just weird. It's just strange to me. So like that was the thing that really shocked me was like literally the second the plane door, like the door of the plane opens, you're like, whoa, like I'm in some kind of like,
You were in a foreign
steampunk.
country because, like you
Yeah,
said,
exactly.
Hawaii is feels like it's its own country. Then when you travel to the
Yeah.
mainland, it feels like you've taken, a trip to
hmm
another place, part in the world, literally. But
yeah,
um,
literally. But it was, yeah, I would just say it was a really cool, it was a cool experience. It definitely like showed me like I'm glad I was just aware enough of the differences when I was young. I would say, that's kind of what I was like. I liked the mainland. It was just kind of like I didn't really when I was younger. I for some reason just never really thought too much about it. I just kind of wanted to see my family at the time.
mhm.
I think my mind wasn't so set on like, ooh, where am I? Like, what is this place? But as I got older, I kind of like realized I was like that because I just never really cared about the differences when I was young, and I just wanted to like see my family.
Mhm.
But you know, as I got older, like you definitely looking back on it, I could see like a lot of things that were just like, I guess strange to me as a little kid,
Foreign, yeah.
going to the mainland. But they were always really good experiences. I think the one that really got me was just when I went to New York and just seeing the cities. That one was visually, that was the first time. And I was older too. I think I was like 17. Um, but that was the first time I was like, whoa, like culture shock, like visually culture shock, like holy, crap. Like there's like
Well, one
uh,
I
buildings,
remember I remember when we were at the University of Oregon my freshman year and it snowed, and one of the things you said that I was taken aback by, and I guess I shouldn't have been surprised, was that when you exhaled you saw your breath,
Oh,
because it was
yeah.
cold. Like you said, like even that was weird for you. Like it's something that I take
Yeah.
for granted because it gets cold in Oregon. You exhale, you see the smoke coming out of your mouth
Mhm.
because it's warm, but and like you said, that
Yeah.
that shocked you too. Just that those small little details shocked you.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, I was like, whoa, like, I mean, I knew that happens. It's not that it shocked me, but the thing is, like, you think it's like it's the coolest thing ever. Like as a kid, I don't know why. It's so funny. Like it sounds weird saying that, but like as a kid in Hawaii, like that was just an unimaginable thing. Like it getting so cold to where you could see your breath, and like you always saw it in movies. There was a place on Oahu called Ice Palace. It was a ice skating rink. I don't know if you know, Paul, but I shred on some ice skates. My grandparents took me there all the time, but like you see your breath in the ice skating rink, and like that's the only place in all the islands that I know of that's cold enough to do that, other than like the top of the mountains when it snows like once every 12 years, or whenever in Hawaii. So like it's really cool. Like it's really cool to all the Hawaii kids, like in Oregon, like at the U of O, like at the Hawaii club, like literally we'd be outside and there'd be 4 of us just
just
like
just just
that,
just
just like
exhaling,
breathing.
just
Yeah,
exhaling
just like
out.
we're just like it never. And like I'm not gonna lie, even till now, like I'm 27, and like when it's cold out and I breathe out and I see my breath, I'm just like, this is sick. I'm still not used to it. I don't know why. It's
Well, I
just a
mean,
weird
it's
thing to
kind of
me.
like me when I traveled to the UK. I was so excited to ride on a double-decker bus for the first time, and I'm just sitting there, like a little happy
Oh
five-year-old
yeah.
kid. And my friend over there, who's grown up there, he goes, "I don't understand why this is so special," kind of thing.
Yeah.
I guess it's something that we take for granted, those small little details there. But yeah,
Hmm.
I guess like, moving on. You've lived in the mainland now for pretty much 9 years.
Yeah.
Would you find what differences did you find between or have you noticed looking back on the 9 years so far between the mainland and
Ooh.
Hawaii? Like,
Oh man, that's a really good question too. Like the differences I saw when I first came to Oregon as opposed to
yeah, well, I mean, just
now.
any
Yeah.
differences. Like, obviously, one thing
Mhm.
that I think you and I talked about a while ago was just like the cost of food and how things, like over in Hawaii, obviously, because everything is imported, so things are a lot more expensive. Like you said, was it five
Mhm. Mhm.
dollars per gallon of milk or something like
Oh,
that?
$8.
$8. Wow.
Now, actually, it's like six. Actually, if you get just the regular milk, it's like six. But if you're trying to get like locally grown milk, it's actually like $8 to $10.
Ooh,
It's pretty rough.
did not know that.
Yeah, it's like $8 to $10 for local milk in Hawaii. Also, like cereals like $7. I remember I came back visiting home for winter break, and like my mom asked me to get me some uh what were they, like popsicles, or the Malona bars. Have you heard of
Yes.
those? Like yeah, like those, some of those at the store. And I remember it was like a box of those, like two bottles of kombucha, and then like maybe two or three other snacks, and it was like $27 or $30 for like four items at a
Wow.
regular store. Yeah, it's like, and because including tax, and there's tax there. So it's like, well, it's not easy to live. And that's actually like, and I would say the biggest, most important difference is the fact that like local people are actually having to leave Hawaii because it's so expensive to live there,
Really?
and they just can't live there anymore. Yeah, and it's like, yeah, it's like, I think maybe fourth in the United States. Like it's more expensive. I think it's as expensive as New York. It was something like that. It's as expensive as New York. I don't think rent wise, but overall, if you're counting like just living there,
Mhm.
because everything is just so expensive. Yeah, I would say that's a huge difference. Just, yeah, when I went back the most recent time, like I lived in a, like, at one point my neighborhood, it's not anymore. At one point my neighborhood was the seventh most dangerous neighborhood in the state, which is funny because it never seemed that way to me. Honoka'i was like always normal. Like I never had a problem walking around Honoka'i. But now when I go there, and it was full of local people. Now when I go back home, like my neighborhood is like I only see tourists. Like it's such a huge difference. Like when I go there, like I literally only see tourists in my neighborhood, and it's such a strange sight. And I think it just kind of shows that like Hawaii is kind of moving like more towards, like not moving. They're kind of just revolving too much around the tourist industry, not focusing as much on the locals as they should.
Yeah,
That's kind of the biggest difference to
and
me, I would say.
I guess one thing going off of that that I guess a lot of people may not know about is the concept of Hawaii versus Hawaiian resident.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I talk about that a lot because, it's definitely very it's very common for people to be like, okay, like I'm a mixed person. I look pretty like ethnically ambiguous. People always try and guess what I am. So I say I'm from Hawaii, and they're always like, okay, so you're Hawaiian, and then I'm like, okay, no, I'm not Hawaiian. Like usually when you say Hawaiian, you're talking about native Hawaiian, and like native Hawaiian are obviously the people native to Hawaii. And since Hawaii was, illegally taken, um, there were sugarcane plantations that were like put all around the islands, and they had gotten workers from the Philippines, from China, from Japan, um, basically like all over, Asia and other places, to go and work in the plantations. And that's kind of the beginning of the Hawaii resident culture. Like a lot of Hawaii residents are like Filipino, Japanese, white, like mixed people whose families have been in Hawaii since those times. And they came over for during the plantation days, or they came over, during like my great grandfather came over, um, because he was the barber of like a general in the Philippines or something, or a commander, and he somehow got his way to Hawaii through that before Hawaii was a state. So it's kind of like you get all these people from different places, and they all somehow get to Hawaii, and then they just start a family there, and it grows, and people kind of get confused between like, okay, native Hawaiians and people from Hawaii. So there are definitely more people from Hawaii who are not native Hawaiians than there are actual native Hawaiians.
Hmm. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And it's almost like if you called all the Native Americans Americans and everyone else American
Yeah.
residents kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
people who, live in America or something. You know what I mean? Like that instead of Americans. It's interesting, but I would say, yeah, I would definitely say it's like something people get confused a lot. Like native Hawaiians and also Hawaii residents are like should be separated, but also I don't really get, if it's someone who makes a mistake twice, I'm kind of like, all right, come on, like, you know, but if I don't really get too, you know, I just tell like too upset if people mistake that. I just correct them like, oh, there is a native Hawaiian and also Hawaii residents, and like, it is definitely important to like know that difference.
Yeah, well, um, and do you find that that there is a big difference between the two in terms of how they represent Hawaii? Like I know that Hawaiians pride themselves a lot in representing the 808,
Hmm.
do you find that the native Hawaiians who, or the people of Hawaii
Hmm.
represent that? Is there a difference between the two if you're a Hawaii resident versus if you're, a native Hawaiian? Like, 'cause I know that the
Yeah.
native Hawaiians they embrace that culture, and those traditions, whether it be in song or in dance or in their language.
Mhm.
Do you find that the Hawaii residents they try to help embrace that or or no?
If I'm being completely honest, I would say the Hawaii residents like to believe they embrace it, but they really don't, as much as they think they do.
How so?
Um, the whole they can't. So I would say it's kind of goes back kind of far. So going back to like kind of the whole thing of like religion, like implementing Christianity
Hmm.
into um Hawaiian culture, like a lot of native cultures, like is is essentially the complete opposite of Christianity. So that's why Christianity likes to, or was trying so hard to erase the culture. Like again, I'm not going to get too into the details just because I'm not a historian, but like, so for example, like there was a type of person in Hawaii called mahu,
Hmm.
and it was like a gender fluid uh, person in society. It was like a title someone had, and they were very highly respected. And but again, they were gender fluid. It was something that wasn't like, not a male or not a man or a woman, a person in between who held a very high status in Hawaii. But now, like, um, essentially when you know Christianity came in, they kind of were like, this is not, like they essentially just shut it down. They were like, that's not how life is supposed to be lived. Like try to erase that part of their culture and like erase a lot of other parts of their culture. And like uh, that Christian mentality of like the very white Christian mentality, I would say essentially is still very prominent in Hawaii. So to if I'm being completely honest, like I don't think that Christianity and like native culture can really thrive together,
Hmm.
because one constantly seeks to erase the other, because you can't have things like you can't have things like, mahu in Christian culture. Like they won't allow it, and it's ridiculous that they try to erase that from other cultures. And that idea of hyper masculine, kind of like the classic kind of American vibe of like hyper masculine Christian society, that's actually very prominent in Hawaii.
Hmm.
I think because of Christianity, and also because of like Hawaii being a very just hyper masculine, like I think just hyper masculine culture. Like not even the native Hawaiians, I would just say the local Hawaiian, the not local, sorry, Hawaii residents, like the locals there, like they also just really try and be like, I don't know, they try and like fake themselves out to think that just because they're from Hawaii, that they're like the same warrior breed as like native Hawaiians. So then they try and talk about like all of these like machismo, like hyper masculine things, and like I'm like, man, Brent, you're Filipino. Like, you're not a native Hawaiian. Like, stop coming in here, like, having all of these, hyper-masculine ideas, like trying to represent Hawaii with like these like, oh yeah, we're just here like to fight, like because fighting is a huge thing in Hawaii, and it's like literally fighting with your fists, like to settle issues. It's like a very local, like Hawaii resident thing, and it's like very hyper masculine, and it's like that's kind of the vibe there. Like you go there, and it's like very much so still like, are you? How good do you look? How big you are? How like like all that kind of stuff. And it's just kind of like it just doesn't meld well with like the native Hawaiian culture. I don't think like the native Hawaiians, like they're like the ones that I've met, like they just want to preserve their culture, and they're not trying to be here like represent Hawaii as like the best kind of people. I would say, like you said, in terms of representing Hawaii. Sorry, I kind of went off on track there for a second, but like representing Hawaii, a lot of local people who aren't native Hawaiian, they really just try and like represent Hawaii as like the best place ever, and like we're better than everyone because tourists go there and they look down on locals and locals get mad about it. So then when like they're very much so like loud, like I'm not talking about native Hawaiians, keep in mind, I'm talking about Hawaii residents, very much so like loud, like aggressive, hyper masculine, like people who just love to fight all the time. And it's like they try and represent Hawaii as like this most badass like place, and native Hawaiian people try and just preserve their culture that they have. And then the local people just try and say like, no, we're Hawaii, like we help the Hawaiians, and this is what Hawaii's like, and like yada yada yada. But they don't actually listen to the native Hawaiians saying, no, this is our land, this is what we want to do with our land. So it's again, like I would take 4 hours to talk to you about like essentially why Hawaii is like that, but I would say that's the biggest difference in terms of representing Hawaii. I would say a lot of Hawaii residents, like they don't actually support the same goals as the native Hawaiians.
Mhm.
They just kind of are more interested in representing themselves and like their idea of Hawaii, you know. And like I'm not gonna like exclude myself. Like I definitely like thought that too. Like you go there and like when you go there, when you live there, like I'm not gonna lie, like people aren't nice to the native Hawaiians. Like not the Hawaii residents, not all the time. Like of course they like fake it and they're like we stand with native Hawaiians, da 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 da. Da. But like I've heard people in my classes in Hawaii say stuff like along the lines of like literally the United States saved you. Like you'd be like wearing rags if it wasn't for the United States. And keep in mind, these aren't white people saying it. These are like mixed non-indigenous people of color. Like these are like Filipinos and like Japanese people, and like these are not white people, and they say the exact same things. And it's very concerning, and it's like kind of disgusting, and it's all of that it's all of the like toxic, I guess, nature of the United States of like essentially like the white saviorism, like they're here to save us. And a lot of the Hawaii resident people fell for that hard.
Mhm.
And like if you go to Hawaii now, like and I know we're not talking about this, so I know we're not talking about the subject I'm about to say, so I won't get too into it. But like if you go to Hawaii now, a lot of Hawaii residents, like they're the type of people who would like support the Capitol riots. They're the type of people who um just say like outlandish things. Like, we live in Portland. Like I know what the protests were like here in Portland. I went to them.
Mhm.
Like I've had people literally say to me like Portland's burning. Like it's on fire. Everywhere's on fire. And I'm like, no, I live here. No, it's not. And they're like, no, you don't know what you're talking about. Portland's on fire.
That's actually
And I'm like,
interesting that you brought that up because when I was at work, obviously I work from home, and
yeah,
and when I speak to my customers on the phones, they ask me, what part of the country are you from? And I say I'm from Portland. They say, oh, are you in the bad part of the country? Like is it and because they believe in their eyes that the city's is coming down in flames. There's rioting and anarchy in the streets, and we can't get. No, it wasn't that like that. You and
yeah,
I, we saw each other during those times too. So it's like, hey, nothing's like it's not what it appears to be, So
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, exactly, exactly. Excuse me.
So I guess one
Yeah,
stereotypical question I must get out of the way is, do you
yeah.
surf?
Do I surf? Yeah, I do actually.
Yeah, are you good
But
at it?
not really. I mean, I would say like I'm good for the amount of times I've surfed because I haven't surfed a lot, and like I'm lucky too. My dad has been a surfer since he was 15, so like he actually like taught me. Um, he actually taught me how to surf, but it's funny because he didn't teach me till I was older. Like I didn't learn how to surf until I was already out of college.
Mm.
So like he literally taught me like maybe like 3 or 4 years ago. He never wanted me to get into that culture. Surfing is a pretty rough culture, by the way. Like especially if you're like surfing with like native Hawaiians, like they do not mess around with that. Like there is a hierarchy of like who goes first and when.
Is there
You
is
know?
that part of the culture of Hawaii? Is that like part of like one of the
No.
is
I mean,
surfing?
yeah. Yeah. I mean like native like I think again, I don't really know much about the history of surfing, but from what I believe from the small amount of information that I remember, again, don't quote me on it, but um I would say it was like a thing that Hawaiian royalty did in like ancient Hawaii, and it had no fins because you need the fins on the board to turn the board,
Yeah.
and it had no fins. You would just like it was just like a piece of wood that they would like glide across, and then I actually don't know how it evolved into the surfing we know today, but like it does go back to that time.
Ah,
Like it
so
goes back,
so the
yeah.
so the Polynesians somewhat
Hmm.
innovated and made that almost into like a sport. So
Yeah, exactly. And I think I don't know if it was a sport because I think only specific people were allowed to do it, which back then. Which again, I don't know so much about that part
yeah.
of it. I think that's just something I've read or heard of once. But yeah, it kind of goes back to then. But surfing is like, yeah, it's definitely a really popular in Hawaii amongst like everyone.
So then I assume you spent every day at the beach then, right? Growing up in Hawaii.
Not me. You're talking to like it's funny. You're talking to like again the I was the weird kid in high school. Like I kind of wanted to like I felt so my personal experience in Hawaii is actually like pretty different I think than most people's in Hawaii. Like I'm again like I said I'm pretty ethnically ambiguous. So like essentially to white people I look Filipino, but then to Filipino people I look white. So white people in Hawaii don't really have a great time. Not gonna lie, not trying to like gather sympathy, like sorry, but like white people don't have a good time in Hawaii. Like Hawaii, not all the time, like white people have a great time, but if you do something wrong, like the Hawaiians will not, and the native Hawaiians and re, even the resident Hawaiians will like not let that slide. Like it is like you have to be very, very respectful. Like you should be very, very respectful. A lot of people aren't, and a lot of native Hawaiians and Hawaii residents put up with it, and they shouldn't. But like you know, just being white in Hawaii is not gonna lie, like it's different than it is in the United States. Like white people, I think, are like 10% of the population. Like there are not a lot of white people in Hawaii. So like for me, like I get called Haole all the time, and it's
Howley,
like
what does that mean?
Haole, yeah. So Haole is like it's oh my god. So essentially, Haole is like this word. I'm not gonna say the original meaning because it's been kind of like distorted, and I don't want to get the history wrong, but from what my base knowledge of the word, it was just a word used to describe foreigners. I don't, again, I'm not going to go into like what exactly it means and like the description of the word, but like it was used commonly before to describe foreigners. And I don't think it was initially like a mean thing to say, but people definitely turned it into like, if you get called a Howley, like they're like probably mad at you. It's kind of like gringo kind of,
Hmm.
but like but like not, but like different, and like how people use it now it's like more insulting. Like if someone calls you a howley, like hey howley, it's like they're probably mad at you, you know. Like so I would get called that all the time, and usually you say that to tourists, you know what I mean, like anyone who's not native Hawaiian essentially I think is howley, but I could be getting that wrong. I think howley maybe might be talking about specific people. I'm not so sure, but um if you get called a howley, it was initially because you just weren't from Hawaii, and nowadays maybe in the last like you know 50 or 60 years it's been used like just to attack tourists, a f and howley, like get the f out of here kind of thing, like what are you doing, you're messing up the land kind of stuff, like which they do. But I would get called that all the time and I hated it. Like I was like I would and I was I'm a quiet person. Like I'm not trying to bother anybody at school, like I was like just a quiet dude who just was kept to myself. So like I was just like, oh, I kind of resented like local culture because like I always felt rejected by local culture.
Hmm.
So I like never went to the beach really. Like I did a little bit with my dad, but like I didn't really go to the beach. I didn't really speak Pidgin, like the dialect there. And like it was kind of like in a rebellion against that because I think I like low-key resented, people for treating me that way, But then as I got older and I went back, I like really, decided to like embrace that part of me. Like, no, I am like a local kid from Hawaii, and like, you know, like even though I don't need to interact with the people necessarily, like to validate, me being local, like I should like look back, into or like look internally, like what do I want to do with that kind of thing, and like do I want to embrace that side, and like that's kind of, and I kind of made the choice to like not really feel like, not the choice, but I over time just stopped really feeling like resentment towards like local people and stuff.
Mm.
So I have a different idea of Hawaii. A lot of people have like are like really like, yeah, like into the local culture from their when they were a kid, and I kind of joined it later.
Mm.
Yeah. Hmm.
So then, I guess my next stereotypical question is it slippers or is it flip flops?
Don't you dare insult me again, Paul. It's slippers. You never call it flip flops. What kind of question? I'm just kidding. I once said, oh my god, I once said foo like that and stopped myself because I never called a flip flop. I never called a flip flop. Never ever. But you go to Hawaii, you go to mainland, and everyone calls it a flip flop. And like I'm not saying it, but you intake the word flip flop just every day of your life, and you go back to Hawaii. And I was like, "Fool!" And I stopped, and my friends were like, "Were you about to say it?" I was like, "No, I wasn't. No, I wasn't." They're like, "You're about to say it." I was like, "I was not about to say it. Slippers. These are slippers."
That's funny. So you avoid saying it at all because it says it the F word over there?
Yeah, the F word. Yeah,
The
it's
F
kind of
word.
like that. The other one is the S word. You never want to call shave iced a snow cone, even though they both start with an S. But it's fine
Wait, so
because
is it a snow
yeah,
cone?
no, it's shaved ice.
No, I'm
Oh my
kidding.
god, I remember. No, no, I'm just joking. No, it's funny. But I remember. So you remember Austin?
Yeah.
Um, for the people who don't know, I dance. But Austin once bet me that if he ever beat me in a battle, I had to in Hawaii go to like the most famous shave ice place on my island, like which is right now near my house, and like order it as a snow cone and then not correct them, not let them correct me.
Did you end up winning that dance battle?
No, I ended up never battling him, unfortunately. But I'll tell you what, which is really funny. Around that time, because Austin started after me,
Hmm.
around that time, I remember he said that, and I was like, that was around the time he could beat me. Like he started like a good amount of time after I started, but like he trained hard, and I remember like at that time he was like, I would see him at practice, and I'm like, oh my god, if I ever battled Austin, like it'd be rough, it'd be hard. And then he dropped that bet on me, and I'm like, I can't lose. I'm like, I can never lose. I'm like, if I lose, my life is over.
Oh man, that would have been rough. Just going back to Hawaii
I
or
know.
and ordering a snow cone, or going to a store and asking for you know flip
Yeah, right.
flops.
Flip flops. Oh god, I can't even imagine.
Uh, well, I mean, like you said, to them, you look white, so like I guess
I
that they
do.
would they would call you, what is that word called?
Howley.
Haole,
Yeah,
right?
Howley. Yeah. Yeah, it's oh god. Yeah, especially now. My dad made so much fun of me the last time I was in. Well, it was last time I was there because, with quarantine and everything, like I don't really leave my house that often, even. So like, um, I don't get a lot of sun, and it's Oregon, so I don't get a lot of sun anyways. And like, I'm pretty dark in my natural skin tone, like in Hawaii, but then I can also get fairly white because I'm Japanese and also Jewish, so like I have pale in my ethnicities as well. So like I can get super white, like super pale, and like I went back to Hawaii recently, and I'm sitting at the airport, and my dad, like, I just hear my dad's voice from a car, like, in the distance. He goes, "You're too white to be my son." Like, from the distance. He likes to make fun of me, and I was just like, oh, no. Is this a tourist pickup? Or I thought I was picking up Brad. It's like, all right, all
Uh,
right.
that's like the parents that drop off the kids the first day of high school and then they scream freshman and then drive off away.
Oh, my parents never did that. That would be rough.
No, my parents thankfully
Freshman.
didn't do it either, but I knew some kids that their parents did that to them as a joke, but
Oh, my
the
God.
hazing of freshmen. So.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
my God. So
Um,
yeah, it's so different.
yeah, well, so I guess you said that you were from Maui.
Hmm.
What other islands are there in Hawaii? There are 8 islands, obviously, but
Yeah.
uh,
So going from east to west, I believe. Yeah, east to west. It is. Sorry, my directions are all messed up in my head. But
I thought you said
so
Weast.
yeah, west. I thought you said west, but yeah, like so going from east to west. So farthest east is Hawaii Island. So it's the biggest island, and it's just called Hawaii. The name of the island is Hawaii. That's why it's called Hawaii Island. A lot of people, or mostly everyone in Hawaii, just calls it the Big Island because it's the biggest island. So even people from the Big Island will refer to it as the Big Island. And they even have shirts that say FBI and it says from Big Island. I'm not even kidding. Yeah, I'm not even kidding. From Big Island. So yeah, like there's the Big Island, Hawaii Island, most east. After that is Maui, which is actually the second biggest island, which is funny because it's the second biggest island, but its population of the entire island is the same population as Eugene, Oregon. Yeah, it's very population density is very small. So it's like Hawaii Island, Maui. Then there are 3 islands, kind of like encompassing Maui in a sense. Like they're farther east, but they're not like in a line. They're kind of like encompassing the island a little bit, or like doing like a half circle. And it goes Lanai, Molokai, and Ko'olave are like the 3 around Maui, and those 4 islands make up Maui County. So
Hmm.
like, yeah, that's like the Maui County islands would be like Molokai, Lanai, and Ko'olave. Um, After that, going more west is Oahu. That's the capital. Well, like that's where the capital is. If you hear Honolulu, so people always get Oahu mixed up with Honolulu. So you hear Honolulu and then you hear Oahu. Oahu is the island. Honolulu is the city,
Ah,
if that makes sense. Yeah.
okay.
So Honolulu is the capital. That's like the name of the city. And Oahu is the name of the island that Honolulu is in or is on. So yeah. Um, Yeah, so Oahu after that. So it's like Maui, Oahu. Then after that is Kauai. That's where my roommate's from, David. Kauai is like the oldest island because the hotspot that created the islands moves east. The like tectonic plate, sorry, the tectonic plate moves west. So the islands were created like going to the east,
Mm.
going that way. So it's the oldest island. It's the island that everybody says has the most mana or like power because it is the oldest. Um, it's also probably the most beautiful, I would say. Like Maui and Kauai are like the most beautiful islands. I would say Kauai is the most beautiful because there's the least amount of people on it, you know? It
Mhm.
is a huge tourist spot too, just like Maui, but like there are a lot of like beautiful, beautiful spots on Kauai. And then the last island in the chain is Ni'ihau, which is also known as the Forbidden Island. I think it's owned by a family actually, and you're only allowed there if you're invited, and I think it has like the highest amount of like pure-blooded native Hawaiians in the state.
Hmm.
Yeah, and I think only native Hawaiians are allowed to go. I think are allowed to go on their own, I think, and I think you have to be invited to go if you're not. It was something like it's something again like I don't want to say too much about Nihao because I actually don't know much about like why people aren't allowed to go there. I think it is just because it is owned by a certain family, but I don't know the logistics behind it really, or not logistics, but I don't know the like history behind it really. Um, but you're just not supposed to. You're not allowed to like just go there because people can go on their boats. It's close enough to Kauai to like go to like like drive on a boat, but you're not allowed to go there at all. So it's called the Forbidden Island.
Ah. Is it
Yeah,
is that the nickname or is that the actual meaning of the name of the island?
that's the nickname.
Oh, that's the nickname. Okay.
Yeah, that's the nickname. Yeah, I don't know what the actual names of the island, if they mean anything or if they're just like names.
And those are
Yeah.
those names are, I guess just to kind of clarify a little bit because
Mhm.
well, I guess for me sometimes I get confused as well because there's obviously Polynesian and that can mean Samoan, that could mean people from Guam,
Yeah.
things like that.
Hmm.
Those are not considered like, for example, Marcus Mariota, great football
Yeah.
player. He is Samoan, but is he considered native Hawaiian or is he considered
No.
Hawaii resident?
No, he would be a Hawaii resident.
Okay.
He's not native Hawaiian. If I don't know if he has any native Hawaiian in him. is he only Samoan? I mean, I know a lot. Again, it's always interesting. It's always funny when you talk about Hawaii people because everyone's so mixed.
Hmm.
Like you don't know who has a little bit of Hawaiian in them. So like I actually have a know. I know a lot of people who have like a small amount of Hawaiian in them. So it's like technically they are all native Hawaiian.
Hmm.
Not technically they are all native Hawaiian. And like if Marcus Mariota would have native Hawaiian blood in him, he would be native. But if it's just Samoan, then he would just be known as Polynesian.
Gotcha. Okay.
Mhm.
Because I was just under the impression that that Hawaii with just so many of the ethnicities there that there's different dialects of Hawaiian.
Mhm. Yeah,
Um,
maybe. I don't know enough about the language to know if there's like different dialects of like the actual Hawaiian language.
mhm.
But yeah, I'm not so sure about that.
Okay.
That's
Yeah.
an interesting question though.
Yeah. That'd be good for a future video as we
Yeah,
come back
it does.
and discuss.
Hawaii does have their own like dialect of English though. Pidgin.
Pi-
Pidgin.
Pigeon. Is it
Yeah,
kind
you
of is
never
that
heard of Pidgin?
no, I've never heard of it personally. Is it
Oh
kind of
my
like
God, yeah.
Creole? Like
Yeah, it is like Creole. Yeah, yeah. It's like it's just an amalgam of like different like languages and slangs put together. So like um I would say the sentence structure is more similar to like Japanese. No, actually, no. It is kind of yeah. It's so strange. It's such a weird language because it is actually an official language now. Um, but
give me
yeah,
some
Pidgin English.
care to give me some examples?
Yeah, sure. So like I'm not the best at Pidgin. I can't speak it like super super well. It is
Yeah.
essentially just English words and like slang words. So and just put in like different structure. So what's a good example? So a good word a slang word, I guess, the one I always use as an example is shoots. You ever heard me say shoots?
No, I can't say I
No, no, no.
have. Yeah.
That's a huge. I've been good at like not using. I've been better at not using pigeon words around people in the mainland because they just have no idea what I'm saying. It's kind of funny, but like so the one yeah, shoots is essentially like it's a funny word. Like obviously in English, it's like what is shoots? Like shoots and ladders or something, but it's like you can use it in pigeon as like three. I usually narrow it down to like three different, two or three different meanings. It can mean the one I use it for mostly is goodbye. So like when you're leaving, you just be like shoots, like it's like a see ya
Mhm.
kind of thing. Yeah, it's like a shoots. You're like shoots. Or it could be like I agree or like I want to do this thing. It could be like a what's the word? Like an exclamation sort of where you're just like, yeah, like I want to do that. So like if someone's like, hey, you want to go to the beach? You're like shoots. Like it's like a yes, like let's do it.
Mhm.
It's like that's something. I would say like how you make sentences. Like that's an individual slang word. Like when you would speak to someone, it's like, hey, bro, why you like go beach? Like that.
Mm. Okay.
Yeah,
So it's kind of like just also like the way that you formulate the words in a
words.
way can be
Hmm.
different.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah.
okay. So
It's like, hey, try wait for me. It's like, hey, what? Try wait. That's a huge one. Try wait. It's like, stop. Like, wait a second. Try wait.
I wait.
Try wait. Hey, bro, try wait. Try wait. Fast kind. Fast kind is like really cool. Fast kind. That's
Uh,
another one. Fast kind, small kind. Hey, what? Small kind tired, It's like, I'm like, it's like that. Like, oh shit. Like, I'm tired. Like, kind of thing.
That's fun. Yeah,
You know?
that's actually pretty cool. I mean, like, cause like over here, us mainlanders, we have different dialects of English. We have Southern draws, the New York accent, and the Brooklyn
Exactly.
accent, and so and then you have Creole and things like that. So it's interesting to know that
Mhm.
Hawaii. I guess I shouldn't be surprised, but I guess in Hawaii, that's cool that in a way English has kind of evolved into its own little subset of languages there too, which that's
Yeah.
really cool.
Hmm.
Um,
It's interesting. It's definitely funny to see like because to me it sounds like to me it's all English words. So it's like again like I think it's pretty easy to understand, which is kind of funny because it's still English words, and I remember I just hear like being here like speaking it around like white people or just anybody who's not from Hawaii. They're like everyone's like what? Like I literally can't understand the words you're saying, and it's so strange for me because I don't speak a second language. But I'm like, this must be what it's like, where it's like, wow, really? You don't understand this? It's strange.
That's funny. Yeah, no, yeah, it's kind of like like for me, I speak Vietnamese, and so like a lot, like sometimes like a lot of people when they, when it's weird because like I feel like I can understand the language, and when someone else looks at me, really funny, or it's weird because it's like like for me, I understand the language. I think in the language. I verbalize. I converse in the language. It's just kind of weird that to think about where someone actually does not understand the language and yet you can and you're speaking in it. And I mean, like I'll be honest. Sometimes I go to a Vietnamese restaurant. I'll order in Vietnamese, and my friend will talk to me in English right after we order, and
Yeah.
I'll speak to them in Vietnamese because my mindset is in Vietnam, speaking Vietnamese, and they'll look at me
Yeah.
funny, and I'm like, did you not understand what I just said? Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
like,
You're like,
and they're
what?
looking
I
at me
answered
like
the
I'm
question.
weird. So, and it's hard for me just to switch it
Funny.
off sometimes. I'll be honest, but
That's funny. That's that's super funny. Yeah.
yeah,
It, my only window into that world of speaking a second language is Pidgin.
yeah. Well, I mean, you did take Japanese in college, so I guess you have
That is
some,
true.
yeah, you have some foreign language under you.
That is true.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Well, Brad,
Yeah.
I guess it's a good place to call it. Yeah, thank you for joining
Yeah.
me. It was a pleasure
No,
to.
Paul, thank you for having me.
Oh, of course, man. Well, and I hope that if anyone has any questions, please, send them my way, and I'll hopefully send them to Brad, and maybe we can address them in a future video. Except for the
Yeah,
surfing one.
yeah,
Everyone knows that he doesn't surf as much,
yeah.
and it is flip flops, not slippers. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah. Don't say that word around me. I'm just kidding.
All right.
Yeah, Paul, thanks for having me. It was really fun, man.
Yeah, of course.